Good afternoon. Welcome to a combined podcast between Roscoe and myself. We are going to try to fix South Africa today, and it's going to be an interesting discussion because Roscoe and I have different ideologies, but we overlap in so many areas. We've had some animated discussions between myself and you, all good. And I think before we kick off as to how we fix South Africa, maybe we should touch upon what the problems are in our country. And I think that if you don't identify what the problems are, it's difficult to actually come up with solutions. So I'll kick off.
Did you introduce yourselves?
Yes.
Oh, I missed that.
So, okay. Yeah. No, we did the introduction, Dental. Yeah. So I'll kick off by saying one key area that we've got a serious problem in our country is corruption.
Yes.
And I know it's everybody talks about it, but it has to be identified as a key area that has to be fixed. How do you feel about it, Roscoe?
Yeah, I think corruption is one of the headline grabbing aspects of, I think, what we can term the poly crisis in South Africa. If we only had a corruption problem, we would be well on our way to prosperity. But the problem is the poly crisis is a political crisis, it's an economic crisis, and it's a social crisis. So corruption sort of extends its reach over all three facets of that poly crisis. So you get government corruption. It is corruption is in civil society organizations, and the problem with corruption is that it almost externalizes the cost of that corruption onto the poorest of the poor.
Yes.
The beneficiaries of corruption, whether they're corporate pirates or whether they're political pirates, they don't really see the results that the corruption has or the impact that it has on the people who need services.
Well, yes, I think that corruption across the board is quite endemic in our country, and as you rightly put, also corporate corruption. The difference between the two, though, between civil society, well, not civil society so much, but government corruption as opposed to corporate corruption. You know, in corporate corruption, there are some checks and balances that will be put in place. You know, you've got a King report, in other words, on corporate governance. There are certain steps that one has to follow. And if that's not followed, there's a certain amount of sanction that takes place. And for instance, if you're a listed company on the stock market, you have to follow certain rules and regulations.
Yes.
As opposed to government, where there's none.
There's a degree of impunity in government where in the private sector, there are regulatory bodies.
Yes.
Okay, of course, you get examples like the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants that have a certain, almost like there's a standard and a code of conduct, and there are penalties on chartered accountants. But in government, because government populates the institutions that are meant to hold itself to account in many ways, all you need to do is just pay off the right people, the right person, and you can get away with whatever you like to. And I think this is a feature of not only South African governance, I think it's particularly endemic in South Africa, and it's a huge problem. But governments all over the world that have this problem. I mean, in America, a few days ago, the New York, the senator, or was it New Jersey senator? He was found with $480,000 in cash and gold bars.
Yes, I saw that.
So
yes.
corruption is just
it's across the definitely it's across the world.
But we're fixing South Africa, not New Jersey.
Yeah,
yeah.
but the problem with our corruption. So if you look at the American corruption, the corrupt officials might take 10% or 20% of the purse and actually utilize 80% for service delivery. In our country, it's the other way around. 80% is stolen. I mean, 20%, and what's on top of of that is this: if you look at our Auditor General, okay, year on year, she brings out the reports on all the municipalities and the state-owned enterprises every single year, and it talks about billions of irregular expenditure, and it gets reported, it gets highlighted, but nothing happens. And this is the key difference between government departments and SOEs and corporate, where if you get caught in corporate stealing, there is a sanction. It does in the main you get sanctioned. In the government, if you get caught stealing, you get promoted.
I think it's important to veer away from generalizations, because if you're going to say if you get caught, you get promoted, I think that there has been cases like that, but it's not it's not automatic, and these are outliers. I think there is a lot of will to root out corruption. Some of it's a lot of lip service, and but the incentive structures, they always oftentimes point towards corruption. For example, in the city of Cape Town, if you want to retire, you just I know, for an example, there's a 5 million rand tender that one official just sort of chowed the money, and knowing that the city is not going to chase good money good money
after bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they just sort of they just let that slide.
Okay.
And it's the problem with corruption in South Africa. You're right. The consequences aren't hard enough for people who are caught in corruption.
Yes.
One of the things that I think we can do immediately from day one is to have specialized corruption courts, in the same way that we have specialized, like a child protection unit. We have specialized units in there. But courts that are specifically set up to deal with instances of government corruption.
Yes.
Not corporate corruption, we can, but government corruption is something that really hurts the poorest of the poor, and it's a breach in trust. So I think that's something that, if we can find the political will to set up these corruption courts and have very stiff, not these like Mickey Mouse sentences. If you steal from the public, you must go away for 20 years. End of story.
Yeah, and in particular, when you have the situations that's come out of Eskom, where you're actually sabotaging a power station for the purposes of corruption. They talk about the parts gang, you're talking about the diesel gang, etc. Now, if that is true, okay, it hasn't been tested in a court of law, and I don't think it will ever be tested, but there's enough smoke for it to be true, or partly true. Now, if somebody willfully sabotages a power station, which has the impact of reducing jobs in our country, and it affects the poor of the poor, I would say that person should be charged with treason. Okay, it's because it is when you affect the state to such a level, that person shouldn't just get a 10-year sentence or 20-year sentence.
Yeah.
That person should be made an example to say, listen, if you take a state asset to the extent that you actually willfully jeopardize the situation, you are going to be charged with treason.
Yeah.
And if you become so strong-willed in actually rooting it out, then it will stop. The problem is that it doesn't stop; it just carries on.
Yes,
it carries on. I mean, some powers general managers now are coming forward and saying, "Look, these are the kind of things that are happening," but there's no political will because the suspicion is that
there are vested interests.
Vested interests high up in government that are utilizing that as part of their purse in terms of actually expedient political will. So that's one area which we I think we can elaborate quite extensively. The other thing that we have in our country as well is that we don't make stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Our manufacturing output is dropping dramatically. Our skill set is dropping as well. And we're exporting a lot of minerals to countries like China and Europe, etc., and then we're importing finished goods. We should have a strategy where we are actually manufacturing locally, and it should be incentivized the same way that we are now exporting motor vehicles in the same way, because that worked. That whole system of incentivizing companies like BMW and Mercedes and European manufacturers to come and actually manufacture locally, it's worked. So we could actually expand that into other areas in the economy, and that would actually stimulate the situation.
Yeah. You 100% right about in terms of Africa and South Africa being used as a resource base for other countries. Part of what I think we should do, especially to leverage now the multipolar world, is not just take a deal that anybody comes in and gives us immediately off the bat. We're trading away our platinum and other strategic resources, where we are a price taker from other markets. Instead, we should be a price maker. We control more of the world's, I think, platinum resources than OPEC controls of the world's oil resources.
Absolutely.
So OPEC's a price maker. They say dollars per barrel of crude is X amount, take it or leave it.
And we are price taker.
And we don't do that. Yeah. So we should be manufacturing more things, but our deals that we make, whether we're making them with the EU, with America, with China, with India, is that we need to have some sort of beneficiation of the minerals.
Yes.
So instead of just the resources leaving the country, we should be processing these minerals here in Africa, adding more value to them, and then accruing more value for when we do at least develop our economy in Africa and South Africa to become more of a secondary economy and a tertiary economy.
Yes.
And it's definitely, I would like to, there are frameworks that are out there in South Africa, various departments, but we need to accelerate that, because if we just giving away our strategic leverage based on sweetheart deals that we're making for the sake of being just for the sake of this is the way it's always been done, then we're actually leaving the majority of the people in South Africa behind.
Absolutely.
Losing jobs.
You look at, and I concur completely. You see, we agree on a
No, we agree
issues.
on a lot of things.
So, for instance, there's a stat that we import about $700 million US dollars worth of farm equipment from Germany. Okay. And I had a conversation with a consulate member and said, listen, if you guys were prepared to do a skills transfer in manufacturing motor vehicles in South Africa, would you look at the situation? And they agreed. They said that this is a possibility. I'm just using one example, okay? Because that's quite a big equipment purchases from overseas. And they were willing to discuss this, to actually open up dialogue. So I wrote to the presidency and the small business, etc., and I wrote quite extensively about it, and they weren't even prepared to entertain the idea, and that is quite frustrating for me that these are simple solutions, and you've got foreign governments that are willing to do it, and you get blocked for whatever reason. I don't know what possible political gain there would be in blocking manufacturing tractors in South Africa. So that is quite bizarre for me. And another thing, maybe this is where we might disagree. If you got we are the highest unemployment rate in the world. Okay, unemployment. And the true figure is over 40%.
It's much higher. We're actually over 50% in terms of the real unemployment rate. More people are unemployed than employed.
We cannot have 20 million people on welfare in our country. It's just not sustainable. It just does not work. That money should be rooted, or partly. I mean, you can't change that now instantaneously because it's progressively got worse. But now we're sitting with 20 million people that are dependent on grants, and some of them, that's the whole livelihood of a family that exists, and And I think that was done by design. I think it was a policy whereby you have so many people that are dependent on the state, they will vote then for the party that's actually responsible for doing that. That's my own personal view. And it's going to get worse. And the thing is this, that your tax base will get less and less, it will get eroded. It's been eroded now. So you have a situation where you've got less income coming in, but you've got this outlay of 20 million people that are beneficiaries. Now, there is a solution to that. I don't know if you agree that this is something that has to change. It cannot carry on this way.
So 20 million people on social grants. Those social grants are the only thing standing between us as a coherent, cohesive country and widespread chaos, the likes that we've seen in the July riots.
Okay.
If we take those grants away,
Okay.
it would be the dissolution of South Africa as we know it. Okay. There would be you hear this thing about farm invasions or whatever, you'd have suburb invasions. Okay. You would have a complete collapse of government. You'd have a complete collapse of South African and then Southern African society. I understand that now there's talk of austerity. There's talk of we need to cut the public wage spending bill. We need to get rid of social grants. We need to do X, Y, and Z. I think a lot of the stuff is ideologically driven. I think a lot of the stuff is driven by a real crisis of inflation and concerns about the economy. And these are well-founded fears. But I think if we take away that cushion that we have, we doom our country. Now, I think we do need to find a solution because we can't keep printing our own money.
Yes.
We've seen now over the last few weeks, now the narrative is now we're running out of money. First of all, no government can run out of a thing that it produces itself. We print our own money. We can't run out of money. It's a completely manufactured talking point, and I think it's being fed into the media and into the commentary for electoral purposes.
Hang on.
Hold on.
Yeah.
But hold on. That we need to tackle that crisis. We need to continue to find a way to make social grants not only increase them to make them sustainable, but to make sure that that giving these social grants don't damage the fiscus and don't lead to hyperinflation. So it's a very fine needle to thread in that way. But I think getting rid of social grants just like that. It's basically pulling the pin out of a hand grenade and rolling it into.
Okay. I must clarify. I'm not suggesting for one moment that you take a scenario where we have 20 million people on grants and then you take it away. I'm not suggesting that. Okay, I agree with you fully. It's just would be unfair. It wouldn't be the right thing to do.
We should in fact increase it because with automation and all that. If we can find the means to do that.
I think that what the answer would be is to put the people that are on social grants into jobs rather. Mm-hmm. Okay, because that's sustainable. By putting them into jobs or creating an environment where there are more jobs, they start paying taxes and then you increase the fiscus.
Yes.
Okay, and there are ways of doing that, and I'll make some suggestions. But coming back to the thing where that it's not true that we're running out of money, that we just print money. Okay, so I'm a qualified accountant, so I'm quite pragmatic about the situations. I mean, you've got 1,000 rand in the bank, okay, and you have to spend 1,500 rand. And if you spend 1,500 rand, then you have to borrow 500 rand. And when you borrow that 500 rand, you pay interest on the 500 rand. Okay, so if you do that year on year, like we've been doing, we reach a situation where we pay about 150 billion rand a year on interest because we've been borrowing money to cover the shortfall between what we get from taxes and what we expend. Okay, so I mean that's Roscoe. I mean that is reality. Now, in terms, if you stop printing money, what happens then? If you just stop printing money, it means that you start devaluing the rand. Okay, because it's market forces come into play. So if you just print, then the rand becomes less valuable. And because we're an economy that imports most of our stuff, and we're importing quite a lot of food, that means then that the price that we import food stuff increases.
Yes.
And by increasing the food stuff, inflation goes up. And by inflation goes up, then the Reserve Bank has to peg it down and increases the interest rates. Like now it's sitting at 11.75. So it's a vicious circle.
Yes.
When you don't control the expenditure. So it can't be a scenario where you just carry on spending without actually putting some restrictions. Now, it's not popular, obviously, and when our Minister of Finance, which I think is out of all the ministers, is one of the ministers that's actually making a lot of sense. When he turned around and said, "Listen, guys, you have to cut back," the pushback was horrible.
Yes.
Obviously, there's an election coming up next year, so it's not popular. But it's just not sustainable. Eventually, you just become a failed state because you just can't carry on borrowing. And the more you borrow, by the way, the interest rate of that borrowing goes up.
Yes.
So it's Roscoe. It's a massive vicious circle. But I'll let you respond. But I'll talk about how we get people off social grants slowly. Not. And I really didn't mean that you do it radically.
No, I understand. I just wanted to point that scenario
yeah.
so that in once if you give just to crystallize how important social grants are, and I think you can understand that everybody can understand that nightmare scenario.
Yes.
In terms of, I do agree with you to an extent on if we borrow, we sort of we're borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today's and that vicious cycle. But if you look at when the government increased its spending on infrastructure in the early 2000s, the economy grew.
Yes.
Spending
Stimulates economy.
Yeah.
Yes, of course
and then
it does. Yes.
After 2009, after Jacob Zuma came into power, ironically, Jacob Zuma was a populist who was going to, fix everything for a number of people. But government spending was reduced and the economy grew like 1.5% a year and the debt ratio increased and then they had to cut spending. So cutting spending to reduce debt is not necessarily the magic bullet. Now, I'm saying there is such a thing as irresponsible spending. Of course, we do need to cut the fat. We have to accept that the entire planet is in this period of a global downturn, and we're probably one sort of financial crisis away from seeing a huge upheaval in socially and politically. But all through history, we can see, even in the history of South Africa, we need to spend more on big infrastructure projects.
Yes.
If we'd spent more on to avert the electricity crisis,
Yes.
to build the power
Yes.
stations when the ROI on what the electricity that we're going to generate versus the price that we were going to pay per unit, let's say in 2006, 2007, we wouldn't be sitting with this crisis now. So we have to spend now because the money that we spend later will be worth less, we'll get less bang for our buck, but we need to do it responsibly. And I think there's a trust deficit in terms of who does the spending, and that's the crisis.
That's the problem. Look, I agree fully with your synopsis that if you borrow money and you pump that borrowing purely for infrastructure development, you will stimulate the economy, 100%. The problem is that it doesn't go for infrastructure development. You look at the scenario with Eskom, where it's borrowed 440 million rand. The rate has managed to drop it by 90 million, but still about 340 million rand. And the reason why Eskom had to borrow so much is because it built these two coal power stations. And in the infinite...
we're still building them, by the way.
It's still messed, okay. But in their wisdom, they decided that the Eskom executives are going to be the project managers. So instead of going to a company and say, listen, how much is this going to cost to build? 36 billion was the first actual bill of one of the, I think it was Kubile, and you got a contract saying, okay, this we're going to pay you in stages until the bill, then when it's complete, I'll give you a final payment. But that's not how it happened. The executives of Eskom, they project managed the situation, and then they went with this wild 51% owned black-owned companies that are the suppliers, and also you have the Eskom engineers that were involved in these projects. And instead of being 36 billion, it ended up being 136 billion or even 200 billion.
No, it was, I can't remember the figures, but it was completely, it was outrageous.
And instead of being a 4-year or 5-year timeline, it's still not fixed. It's like 10 years later. Okay.
Yeah.
And Eskom was a viable company. It was one of the most esteemed power generators in the world. Okay. It was handed over. It's completely stuffed. They borrowed money. Okay, the same principle of what you said about the economy. They borrowed money. It's supposed to have gone for capital projects, which it was, but a lot of it was stolen, as we saw in state capture. It was stolen.
Yeah.
Okay, and now we have a situation that the interest, that the income that Eskom generates does not even cover the interest that we're paying on those loans.
Yeah.
And this is why we get clapped with 32%. I don't know what the latest figure, I think NERSA has approved a 32%.
Over 2 years, yeah.
Over 2 years.
Yeah.
And everybody now, the poor, has been affected by this process of borrowing money, going to capital projects where the majority of the money gets stolen, the interest rate goes up, and then we're paying the cost.
Well, I don't think, I do take issue with the majority of the money being stolen. I would have less of a problem with, I think some of it got stolen. And then we come back to the proposal, the Romero Palm Correctional Institute for Political Corruption, like just lock them up, like that guy said one time.
Yeah.
But yeah, the borrowing is important. Irresponsible borrowing is something that we need to deal with. All governments borrow. All governments are in debt too. So if nobody has money, by the way. Yeah. No country has money, but how we manage our debt responsibly, and we have to look at the sort of a 50-year time frame in terms of managing this debt. And we won't be around in 50 years' time, but the imperative that we have to stave off is we need to stave off hyperinflation, and we need to make sure that when we borrow, we do it in a way that stimulates growth.
Yes, agreed 100%. And you are completely right. I actually wrote about this some time ago that we talk about the debt ceiling. I think we're sitting at about 74% borrowing on GDP at the moment. I think it's sitting around there. And I completely concur with you that if you increase the debt to go into capital projects, then you are stimulating economy, you're creating jobs, etc. So I actually went on Facebook and I put a controversial post where I said, let's borrow a few trillion. Let's go for it. Let's go past let's go to 90% of GDP. Okay? But utilize that money, the additional borrowings, the 2 trillion on capital projects, on fixing stuff. Okay? Don't put that in the hands of government though. Don't let it go to treasury. Okay? Have a situation where you create a state fund. It's
like a sovereign wealth fund.
Like a sovereign, yes, for infrastructure development, so that money goes directly into the separate account. In a separate account, okay, administered partly by, you have government oversight and you have private sector. You have a private sector that go in with proper business skills and best utilize that capital to actually put it into work. Properly work. Now that in that instance, I don't mind if you go, I'm probably going to be slated by saying this, even if you go past 100%, you go past that figure, if it gets utilized, because what happens, you stimulate the economy. By stimulating the economy, you have companies that earn more money, and you have more jobs, you have job creation. So that people pay taxes, so the exchequer increases. Therefore, because of that situation, the result is that you can pay back the debt.
Yes.
Okay, it's a cycle. But then you have to do it on that basis. If you're going to borrow that kind of capital and you put it in the hands of the countries, they'll be even more screwed, completely screwed. So we concur, but maybe the way to implement it is a little bit different. But the end result would be that I agree that it was
in principle. Obviously, there are a million other considerations, like underneath that principle. But I mean, we all on the same side here of how to find the way out of this trajectory that we're on at the moment, and we acknowledge that the trajectory of the country is not what we want it to be. So, like I said, the poly crisis it's social, it's economic, and it's political.
So we concur then that we should actually borrow even more.
We should borrow responsibly.
For capital expenditure.
And we should look at the terms, and we should also look at who we are borrowing from, because I think that's also an important consideration. And what the terms are. What the terms are.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, we can't just like take money from anybody. I mean, you wouldn't take money from just anybody, because there's strings attached to some people would have more strings attached than others. There's no such thing as a benevolent benefactor in the world of geostrategy. And
unfortunately, there isn't such a situation, and I definitely would not want to borrow from the World Bank and IMF. I mean, those are institutions that we should stay away from, because then they become involved in our geopolitical structures, and they start dictating how we should be running a country. So I don't think there is any institution worldwide where one can actually borrow responsibly. Do you know of any? Not even BRICS.
Yeah, BRICS is interesting because it's sort of it's supposed to be an economic bloc, and there is a great deal of I think mischaracterization of BRICS as a security bloc.
Okay.
Like NATO is a security bloc that sees to the sovereignty and protect the alliance partners from any military or peril. BRICS is more of an economic grouping. Now, China initiated the Belt and Road project. 2 weeks ago, Joe Biden also did something very similar to a Belt and Road project. So there's massive infrastructure bills to effectively build trade routes that would benefit America. So we're not short of competition is good, even competition between geopolitical powers. So if we're going to, now we're hosting the AGOA summit with America. America has given up this thing about trying to paint us as some sort of villain. They've accepted.
Thank goodness for
they've
that.
accepted that, and even China and Russia have accepted that. Like, look, South Africa needs to walk its own path, and we understand now that we don't have to choose one or the other, but we can leverage not one against the other. We can leverage what's best for us. So I'm interested to see what comes of the AGOA summit later this year that we are hosting, and I'm also interested to see how Joe Biden's Belt and Road. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's a massive investment in similar to the lines of the Belt and Road initiative.
Okay, so because they're trying to stimulate their own economy.
They have to. I mean, they you can see what's happening in America, that it's losing prestige and influence along in its spheres of influence that it's traditionally had. Even its initiatives, there's a wariness when it comes to the Ukraine war, and that's going to be the biggest issue when it comes to the American elections. The issue is, should we pull out of Ukraine or should we stay there? And you can see how the lines are forming. It's like Democrats are saying like, yeah, we should support our partners, Ukraine and NATO, and Republicans and independents are largely saying like, no, that's not our problem. It's not our fight. I think both views suffer from a few idiosyncrasies that are maybe not constructive to stability and peace in the world. But as far as South Africa is concerned, we need to look after the prosperity of our people, because
Absolutely.
we remember the July riots, and we're still trying to recover economically from that, and COVID, and the bad decisions that we've made over 10 years, and multiple crises.
Yes, absolutely. So we covered the fact that we need to eradicate corruption. I think we're gonna.
So our thing is put people who are guilty of political corruption in jail. Like that's it. Specialized courts.
Quickly.
Specialized courts that can expedite corruption, political corruption, or corruption linked to state enterprises or matters that involve the public purse. Because when you are suspected of corruption at that level, you can pay many advocates and so much money to defend yourself. Like Marcus Jooste, for example, he may not see a day in jail because he's well resourced.
Yes.
Same as look at Jacob Zuma.
Yes.
He saw a week in jail, then he
because
of the political pressure that came to bear, and the social and political forces that would he is I think ensconced by. So I think these corruption courts need to be
implemented straight
the
away.
best of the best, the best prosecutors, the best investigators,
And
almost
independent.
like
And independent.
Yes, there needs to be a firewall between government and but there is already, but there's a separation between government and the judiciary. You can't. It's very very difficult to say that the judiciary is colored by any sort of political consideration. In fact, the judiciary has been one of the main arms of governance that's kicked back against the ruling party and government. So to fix that kind of political corruption, specialized corruption courts, and I think there would be enough political will to implement that. We just need to get this idea to the right people.
And I would strongly push, like I said earlier, that if you actually get caught in sabotaging state assets, that you should treason. That's it. Treason. And life sentence. That's class.
Well, we'll leave that to the specialized judges.
But I mean,
we don't want to be accused of judicial interference.
No, but I mean, but it must be a harsh sentence. It must be a harsh sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talk about that. We talk about manufacturing, right? That we should manufacture more. That
beneficiation.
In Africa, I think that it's endemic in the whole of Africa that we just export, and then we import, and we export at ridiculous prices to the detriment. So we talked about that. We talked about the fact. Well, we didn't quite agree on that, but we talked about social grants, that the status quo cannot stay the same, and there is a solution to reduce that, but I'll get onto that just now. And we talk about capital expenditure. I think we both agree that we should crank it up, and I know that a lot of people are going to be critical about it. We should borrow more, but the money must go towards the development of infrastructures and capital projects, like we both agreed. Now, on this social grants, so I'm a person that for 36 years has been assisting entrepreneurs to develop entrepreneurs. Okay, and entrepreneurship development is an area whereby you can create jobs. Okay. It's been proven. I mean, it's not unique. The idea is not unique. It's been proven across the whole world. Okay, so what my suggestion is that you force through legislation. So I don't agree on the BE structure at the moment, because although the ideology was to distribute wealth, it hasn't.
I don't agree with BE because there are too many white people involved in BE. This is the problem.
Okay, well, it doesn't. Okay, well, let's just say it hasn't worked.
It doesn't work. But I do want to talk about but fronting is a massive problem. If you go into websites and say we have a BE certificate of what's the highest rating?
One. I think it's the highest
level one.
Level one.
And then you look at the board and you like, but how can this company, which is like as lily white as the Tottenham Hotspur home kit, like be BE rated? So I think that I just wanted to bring that to bring that up. But you are right in that BEE hasn't worked, because BEE doesn't work for a spaza shop owner. BEE only, or broad-based black economic empowerment, works for somebody who's already politically and economically connected and resourced.
So you've changed in effect. You changed one elite to another elite,
and that's what happened.
That's what's happened.
That's what happened in that's the roots of the crisis that we face now.
Yeah.
Before, the elite was white, and now it's white with kind of like a co-option of some elements within governance. You spoke about treasury, and you like the Minister of Finance and the independence of the Reserve Bank, and we can I don't really have I'm not going to die on that hill about the independence of the Reserve Bank. I'm not going to die on the hill about like whether such and such a minister is good or bad or whatever, but the cabinet that we have, or rather the ministers that control the economic levers of this country, they're liberals. There's no doubt. The real liberals are in the ANC, and they are functionaries who sort of have a big say of economic policy and treasury and things like that. In the DA, they say they're liberal, but the liberals who have control, or rather a big input into our economy, it's within the ANC. And so there's kind of like a split between the technocrats who run the economy in the ANC on behalf of government, and the base of the ANC who look at things like, well, we have all these liberal measures that were in place since we changed from the Reconstruction and Development Program to GARE since that time. And it's a multifaceted problem, but one of the things that this base within the ANC and the EFF and other left-wing parties identify is that as soon as we became a neoliberal based entity, effectively, the ANC became a neoliberal entity when it comes to our economic trajectory. Things haven't improved. In fact, they've gotten worse. Now, they may be incorrect to identify that correlation and causation. In fact, that like, okay, well, this happened then, so this has caused that. It's much more complicated than just saying liberals are in control of the economy, so the economy is tanking. But the ANC, in terms of its policy, it has, I wouldn't say an overwhelming liberal approach, but there are the drivers of the ANC's economic or government's economic policy is liberal. It's very business friendly.
But it's not manifesting. It's not manifesting, because you look at a situation. You got like a minister of energy, with these archaic communist philosophies that is screwing our country completely in terms of energy and mineral resources. You have total disinvestment of international corporates that don't want to invest in our mineral resources because of that idiotic ideology. So when you say it's neoliberalism, I mean, it doesn't actually show. And in fact, this is because of these kind of attitudes, you have Transnet that's been completely destroyed. Instead of opening it up and saying, okay, Transnet is a mess, it's affecting our economy badly. I mean, if you look at the results of mining companies, they describe the situation that they can't utilize Transnet for logistical purposes in a reduction in profits and in terms of retrenching people, right? So the right thing to do in that kind of instance is to form a public-private partnership. That is the right thing to do, because if your ideology is centralized control, which it is now, which is a communistic approach to the economy, and it's not working for the masses, then you should open it up and say, okay, listen, Transnet, we messed it up. Let's form private-public partnerships, like the harbours. In the Durban harbour, 60% of our containers gets pushed through in that situation. The backlogs are enormous. Okay, so it's not working. Due to the ANC's country deployment, they're putting people in key positions that don't have a clue. Okay, because of political expediency.
Cadre deployment is a problem. I understand.
So then, if you've got an important harbour like Durban, Cape Town, Richards Bay, semi-privatize it. Don't do it completely private, but semi-privatize it so you bring the skill set to actually make the thing work so that you can uplift the economy. So I don't see the ANC as being neoliberal. In fact, I see the ANC as being completely centralized. I mean, to give you the example with PRASA. The Western Cape government petitioned government and said, listen, we want to run PRASA in the Western Cape, okay? Because I'm not a DA fan. I've got my views about the DA. But there's no dispute that the areas that is governed, regardless, putting aside some of the key issues that I think you and I both agree, but it works. It's working. Okay, it works. So if that is the case, and if government wasn't so set in centralizing control of every single aspect of the economy, they would say to Western Cape government, okay, listen, you know what? Okay, you want to run the trains, etc. Okay, we're going to devolve the power. The same with the South African police. Okay, you want to devolve the power, spread the power so that it becomes more effective, as opposed to trying to hold on to the power and actually destroying the country in the process. So I must say I don't quite agree with your neoliberalism approach. I think what it is.
I didn't say neoliberal. That's important.
You did mention neoliberal.
Okay, then I misspoke. I said the real liberals are in the ANC. The governor of the Reserve Bank is a liberal. The Minister of Finance is a liberal. The Reserve Bank is a liberal institution. It's one of the only private reserve banks. It is the only private reserve bank in the world.
Yes.
Every other reserve bank is under state control, but our Reserve Bank is. It's not something that I'm subject matter expert on, so I'm just going to leave it there. But what I would say is that we can't say like this ideology is good and this ideology is bad, because we are a diverse country, and I think our strength is that we can draw on different traditions to make something new.
Yes.
And I think the dividing lines between different traditions are becoming chasms, because politics is a thing that divides people. We can say, you can have your view on Gwede Mantashe. I'm not going to die on the hill for a guy that I don't know. I don't know the guy. I don't know what he does, whatever. I have a view on him and his programs or whatever. The same as what I do. You did mention cadre deployment. Now, cadre deployment is not necessarily a bad thing, because everybody does it. Jordan Hill Lewis is a cadre. He was deployed by the DA to be Musi Maimani's speechwriter, and then he was deployed by, there is some sort of electoral process to get him to the mayor. Trevor Manuel was a cadre. He was deployed to be the Minister of Finance. Every single person who's put into government by any political party is a cadre that's deployed. Craig Kesson, the former Director of Corporate Service is a DA cadre. He got that position by stabbing Patricia de Lille in the back. So we have to get away from this thing where we only characterize our team as being virtuous and the other team as being pure evil. It's not that simple. But I would say that in terms of devolution, this is where I differ from my political party a little bit. I think that in some cases devolution is a positive thing, but I would balance out the interest of our sovereignty and our national security. So if somebody comes in and takes over, like SAA, for example, our national carrier, we've been carrying it on our back for so long, and it's been such a a heavy burden for us to carry, fiscally, and then also just in terms of our image abroad. And like, you just need to say, like, why South Africa? You could say something. You could say Nkandla, you could say SA, you could say it's one of the basket case of issues that serves as a meme for why South Africa is broken. But in terms of the national carrier and our ports and our rails, these are and energy also. These are strategic areas that we need to maintain some kind of a very nuanced and balanced sovereignty, or rather control over. We can, again, it has to work in terms of private-public partnerships, like we're doing with Eskom, with the IBPs coming in and feeding into the grid. I think that's a common sense. Yeah, but we can't. I'm not gonna stand here and say like I'm going to that my team is the best and your team is clearly the worst, because it's not a cartoon and life doesn't work like that. We're looking for good people who have a vision for taking us out of this poly-crisis. People who are honest are going to say, like, listen, guys, there's no quick fix to this, actually. You will never sit in the shade of this tree, but it's very important for you to help us to like plant the seeds and water this plant so that South Africa continues to exist as a functional state in 20, 30 years' time.
Yes. No, I agree fully. In terms of what you're saying. I just think that the public-private partnership should be expanded a little bit more, okay? But the state assets shouldn't be sold as such, okay?
Yes.
So, and a perfect example, I think, of this working is Telkom, okay? Telkom was listed on the Johannesburg stock market, so it means that the populace can actually own shares in a public utility. It's still owned a big chunk of it by the state. Okay, so now you have Telkom, a state-owned enterprise. It's listed on the stock market, so it's regulated by corporate good corporate governance, and that utility has paid, I think, 2 billion rand worth of dividends to the state. And it's paid tax to the exchequer. So you take a utility, semi-privatize it, put it onto a public purse, where you have the public can actually own shares in the utility, and it pays taxes.
Yes.
So why don't we do with all of them, the whole lot?
Well, we have to do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, but I mean, if that works, and you got a test case that it does work, then apply it across.
Sure, but if you can wear a woolen jersey and it can keep you warm, but that doesn't mean wool is going to work as an underpants. So you have to take it as a you have to
say that the principles are the same, Roscoe. It's still a company, okay? It's still a company, and you have a situation with Eskom and Denel. I mean, Denel is totally destroyed. SAA destroyed. And you bring in proper management, and you bring in proper corporate governance, and what you have, instead of taking money from the exchequer with bailouts all the time, you turn those utilities and those state assets into a situation where they're actually paying taxes and paying dividends to the state, which, in a way, it's a communist ideal, because you're taking a state asset, and that state asset is generating revenue for the state. While now, what's happening, the state assets are draining money from the state. So you reverse the whole process by applying it back, which is a bit of a communistic ideology.
I would take that. You almost there. You nearly there, Dave. I'm gonna comrade Dave. Comrade Dave is almost entered the chat. But you take this. You take first of all, Telkom being listed. It doesn't help somebody living in Parkwood. So the stock exchange is not the economy, and I think that's an important distinction to make here. What I would advocate for is that you take these SOEs, you list them, but every single South African by birth gets shares.
I agree.
You are entitled to that.
I agree.
Not, rather than
I tell you, we are in agreement here. Okay,
Comrade Dave.
No, don't call me comrade. No, that's why when people talk about capitalism, I say no, but you got the wrong impression about capitalism, because no pure system works. It's a blend of systems. Okay, so this is my take now. You talk about distribution of wealth. Okay. And B hasn't worked for whatever reason. You could be right, but it's just moved from one elite to another masked elite. Okay, so now you have mining companies. Okay, and they're mostly listed on the stock market. And incidentally, the biggest stock market or share owner on the stock exchange is PIC. Okay, and PIC is funded. It's got 2 trillion rands worth of assets. It's funded by the pension funds of state employees.
Yes.
Okay, so the state employees indirectly benefits from the stock market.
Yes,
in the pension fund. Okay, so this perception that a certain percentage or this percentage is owned of the JSE is owned by whites is actually a bit skewed, because you have to take into consideration that PIC is mostly funded by black pension funds.
But it doesn't help the perception. I mean, and I think this is a function of the structural problems that we face. That I don't know what the figure is, but like 80 or 90%, even 60, 70% of the CEOs of listed companies on the JSE are white. So that's. I'm not saying that's. And a be-all and end-all indicator that we haven't reformed. It's interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon to see how it's one of the symptoms that we can see that the structure of the economy hasn't changed. And I would say that that's an indictment on the ANC, because the ANC as the ruling party has an obligation to deliver on what it was elected to do in 1994. It's had almost 30 years of unbroken rule, and if it can't change the structure of the economy in that, it obviously hasn't implemented its plans in the correct way.
Correct way. Yeah. So take the instance now of wealth distribution. If you have a mining company, most mining companies, as I said, it's listed on the JSE. Okay. And the JSE stock market is a good platform for capital raising and actually raising funds to get a business going, in particular mines. Now, so here you have a situation where most listed companies have got employment share incentive schemes. Okay, the problem with those schemes that is in the main, it's for managers up and directors, and this is why you find that CEOs of these listed companies have these horrendous pay packages where they're earning 60, 80, 100 million rand a year, which includes the share incentive scheme. Okay? And then you have a situation in Longman where the CEO drives to work in a fancy car, and the people that work for Longman, I think I'm quoting correctly, the company is Longman. I don't want to be sued before saying
we speak under correction.
Under correction, I think it's but I think it's Longman. But you have a situation where he drives to work with a fancy car, and the people that are risking their lives underground live in shacks without water and electricity. Okay, now that is absolutely BS. When you have that kind of situation, and in particular, when you have platinum prices at the time going through the roof.
Yes.
So it's not like they don't have the capital. Okay. So a company like Longman, what it should do is this: they should first of all give all the employees part of the share incentive scheme. It's there. It's there. So if you just increase the share incentive scheme to include all your workers, okay, you have maybe a knock of 1 billion rand against your income statement once off to actually increase your share incentive trust. Okay, so it's a once off. Okay, but then if you've got all your workers actually owning a share of that company. Okay?
Would you be in favor of this being mandated by government, or what would be the way to bring the horse to water?
I believe that businesses respond better through being incentivized,
Yes.
as opposed to being
Human
penalized.
beings, yeah.
Okay,
I agree
So
with you.
you know when you force somebody to do something, the natural instinct is to rebel. Look at kids. Okay, I mean that is a natural situation, right?
Yeah.
But you've incentivized, and the way you incentivize, maybe I haven't thought it through properly. But say, for instance, you have the share incentive scheme, and it's a R1 billion hit on your income statement. Okay, make that a double tax write-off. For instance, that you can claim it double from than the expenditure. Say as an incentive. Say, okay. So the state gets a little bit less tax, but now suddenly you've got all your workers, right, that own shares in the company, right? So as the company grows, and you do it properly, so it mustn't be, you know, I mean, I don't know what minimum wage is now. Is it 6,500?
In the mining sector.
In the mining sector,
Rock
what's
driller is 12,500.
Is it 12,500? Okay, I'm so out of touch. Okay.
It could be a little bit more, but I remember at Marikana it was it was 12,500. It could definitely be a little bit more than that.
So for instance, so make the share incentive scheme proper, not the token.
Yes.
The proper. So if you're earning 12,500, okay, and you put in proper structures, you make it at least 120,000 rands worth of shares that you issue out. Okay. Now you do it proper. Not if you're earning 12,500, don't do it like 2,000 rands worth of shares or 3,000. You do it proper.
Yeah.
But you put conditions on that. You have to stay within the company for 5 years, and you know you can't just give that share incentive scheme and then the guy resigns in 2 or 3 months' time and now he tries to claim that kind of benefit.
Yeah.
Okay. So you put proper structures so they have the longevity of the situation. Now, if you're earning 12,500 and you've got 100,000 rands worth of shares, and the price of platinum goes up dramatically, and your dividend check that you get for owning your shares is said at the end of the year, it's a double paycheck or triple paycheck. Okay. What you'll have, first of all, you'll have real distribution of wealth.
Yeah.
Proper, because now you've got ownership. There's nothing like more a better distribution than owning something. Okay. You do that. You then so you have a situation where your productivity goes up, so the benefit comes back to you. You'll have less strikes.
Yep.
Okay, because now you're part of the ownership. You own the company.
Yeah, you have a stake in it.
You have a stake in it. Plus, what you also do is you put these a worker body through the trust. You put them on the board of directors. Okay, you actually have board representation where the workers' rights are actually represented on board level, not through managerial structures. Okay.
Yeah.
And for heaven's sake, give them a house with water, electricity.
Yeah.
Because that can still be your asset.
Yeah.
It's on your property. So on your balance sheet, it doesn't degenerate your balance sheet. It's on your balance sheet. It's still an asset that you've built a house. You know, after Marikana, they started doing that. It took Marikana for Longman to actually wake up and say, okay, now we're going to build houses. Why didn't they do that in the very first place? Okay, It would have averted that whole situation. So, Roscoe, that is true wealth transfer. That's sustainable wealth transfer.
Yeah.
Okay, and you have a happy worker that shares in the profits of the company, and that's how you do it. You don't do it with Gwede way, where you force an international corporate wanting to come into South Africa, that 30% must be given away. That's not how you do it. You do it through a proper incentive program where you incentivize people from doing it. And I promise you that if you do this and you give the company a tax break, a double take on the expenditure, the majority would actually do it. And the it will uplift the people.
Yeah.
So that's, instead of the BE and the film, all these, that doesn't work. Do it this way. That is one suggestion of actually fixing our country. give people ownership.
Yeah. I broadly agree with you. No ifs, ands, or buts. You know?
Really?
And yeah, no, I think there are things that if I was negotiating this sort of compact, I would say, look, I'm prepared to listen to you in the stuff, but I'm not giving away the one thing that's non-negotiable is the welfare, because that's the thing that we need to eventually we're talking about 3-4 generations have a relook at, but at the moment it's a thing that's stopping us from as a society from falling over the precipice. So anything where we would cut things like the what was the COVID distress grant, or I think these pensions and these safety nets should be expanded. We need to look at ways to expand that rather than looking at, well, we don't have enough money. Well, we need to find the money for that stuff. And yeah, if this giving people dignity, I mean, it's a shock. The inequality in South Africa is shocking. The average salary in South Africa, I'll pull this up now. It's a report in Business Tech in the 27th of June, so it's very recent. Stats from Stats SA, the average salary for South Africa. Now imagine the number that you think it is. It's not what it is. What do you think?
The average income,
monthly salary of a South African average.
Working South African.
Yeah,
it's probably about 4,000.
25,000. 25,000 rand is the average salary of a South African. Now, if you consider, then you think of all the people who survive on 2,000 rand, 4,000, 3,000 rand, all the way up to that 25,000 rand bracket. Now you consider the lifestyle of a person is 25,000 rand, and that's okay. That's fairly high. You can live you can send your kids to university. On 25, you can make a plan. So that's an indication that the super wealthy, the wealthy are so wealthy that it lifts that average up to, so it brings into stark focus the inequality that hasn't been addressed, and it creates a lot of resentment, and that resentment is residual from generation to generation, and it's building, and that's where I think a political crisis, it's an important part to talk about how to fix South Africa, because we're in the throes of an economic crisis. The social crisis you can see all around you. But the coming political crisis is the one thing that we need to stave off, and we need to deal with that from the social, by attacking the social and the economic, because the political crisis of violence and unrest and division and hate and just a lack of a common national identity as South Africans.
But isn't that the reason that is occurring is because of the high unemployment?
No, exactly. It's a poly crisis. It's unemployment. It's unemployment. It's the economy. It's the social things. It's not. It's not like you cut the head of a hydra, another one grows off. So you need to sort of kill the beast, like from all angles.
From an employment perspective, I would think is the root. Okay, so I was going to tell you my idea on reducing social grants. Okay, so we got sidetracked. I don't know. We got completely sidetracked. But anyway, but it's all good. So I think I'm correct in saying that our total social grants spent into Exchequer is 130 billion a year. I think I'm right.
That's money well spent.
Okay. No. Okay. I think our difference in that is this: that by giving people the grant, which is necessary because of the situation there is in our country, it's not sustainable. It just can't. You can't. What you have to do is utilize the money in a way that you create jobs, rather. Yeah. That is a better option as opposed to increasing grants continuously. And my idea on that is this: that well, as you know, I hesitate to say because of the connotation. I put the prefix that I'm an impact venture capitalist. Okay, because I'm not like your typical venture capitalist, and And it's quite interesting when I actually say that this is what I am, people have a bit of a reaction, okay, because of the stigma attached to it. But you and I know each other, and you know that you're not your typical venture capitalist. But the way, if you look at the kind of money that's been put towards grants, all right, and I agree with you that you can't just take it away, but I believe that it's prudent to reduce it constructively, but replacing it with creating
with
jobs.
employment. Absolutely.
Okay. So in other words, so you balance the two.
Yeah.
So in other words, you try, and I don't know how one would do it precisely, but you find a balance that as employment goes up, your dependency will drop. Okay, there will be a formula that one can work out.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So now, instead of increasing grants, what you should do is this, and this I would legislate. This aspect I would legislate. I would go to all companies, in particular pension administrators, etc., and would say, okay, 5% of your profits, 5% of your profits must be put in a different fund to the capital expenditure fund, into a venture capital, sovereign venture capital fund like Ghana. Ghana's got one of them, okay? And that money then gets utilized. And again, you give tax breaks. You force the issue, but you give breaks for that, okay? Incidentally, there used to be a tax break if you invested in venture capital fund, and in our government, in the infinite wisdom, took it away, that incentive. Anyway, so and you know, our government does just bizarre things that it's just, you look at it and you say, what? I mean, you just can't believe what they're doing. So it goes into a state venture capital fund. The state venture capital fund is run again by a partnership of government and corporate. Okay, so now you bring people with a track record in the game that understand the game. Okay, and what that fund does, it purely invests in startups or developing companies. Okay, so someone is with an idea, comes with an idea. I mean, this is what my company does. Comes with an idea, you've got a business plan, etc., and then that fund funds this opportunity by way proper private equity and venture capital traditions. Yeah. Okay, but obviously because it's a sovereign fund, your return is lower, so you don't expect as higher return as you would. Yeah. Okay, so normal venture capitalists want a 20% return on their money eventually when they exit.
Some projects will fail, some will break even. You're looking for the one that goes 10x.
Yeah, so even the sovereign fund just makes a little bit more than putting the money in the bank, which it's 11%. So they're making 12 or 13%. It's sufficient, right? Now, what happens with that is, and I would put a balance between tech, because tech doesn't really employ a lot of people. Okay, so if you're developing an app or something like, it's not a lot of people. So, but although I would still fund some of them, but the majority of the funds I would prioritize manufacturing and agriculture and that kind of activity. Okay, so if someone's got an idea of, again, let's go back with the tractors. I want to manufacture tractors, and there will be skills transfer, and that will employ 30 people, say 30 people, right? That will stimulate the economy, because so now that fund will just automatically grow. But it must be emphasized, it must be managed by private enterprise with government oversight. Yeah. Okay. So you don't want to have corporate crookery going on, but you don't want government to be able to write the check either and have influences to the people that actually get the funding. Now, if you start that, okay, and you build it at 5% of profits, you'll have billions every year. Every year you'll have billions, okay, and it will grow automatically over a period of about 10 to 15 years. Okay, if you do this properly, and with proper management, you can. Oh, and mining, by the way, and also go into mining. also finance mining operations, small scale mining.
Yeah.
Small scale mining, not the big lot, small scale, okay? You would eradicate unemployment in the country.
Yeah.
Then there would be no need for grants. Okay. If you do it on a basis where you start reducing grants and you have a situation where your state fund grows, it will eventually eliminate unemployment in the country. And that is not a difficult, Roscoe. That's not difficult to actually implement. It's very easy to implement because right now I think the Department of Small Business budget is 3 billion rand a year. Yeah. Now I made an inquiry once, and I actually approached the Department of Small Business and asked them, now with 3 billion that you've got to develop it, how many entrepreneurs do you develop a year? They've got no clue. They don't understand. In fact, the special advisor to the Department of Small Business is a professor. It's not even a practitioner in the industry. It's not even someone that can actually be in business to help other businesses, but an academic is a special advisor. Anyway, I've taken a long time to explain this thing.
It's good. I think it's better to over-explain that than under-explain it. And what I like about that proposal is that the IDC and other institutions, DBSA, that's government funding. So it comes from being drawn from government fiscus. What I like about your proposal is that you're roping in the private sector and make it mandatory. So it's not only government can go 50-50 with the private sector. Like whatever every rand that gets put into this fund, government can match that. And I would say it's we shouldn't be seeing it as a way to eliminate grants, because we will still always have people who need, especially with increasing automation, and people people will be, there's no such thing as a permanent job anymore. So there will be moments in everybody's life where they face precarity, and they need to know that that the social safety nets that they've paid into will be there for them when they need it. So, but I do understand that the pressure on the fiscus needs to be relieved, of course, because we can't just be a sugar daddy, it's damaging. But we also need to have some sort of mechanism to encourage growth and foster entrepreneurship in the country. The barriers to entry for entrepreneurs, effectively, it's about who you know and where you're born, and there are significant hurdles that you have to clear, particularly if you are black and if you're in the Eastern Cape or whatever the case may be. Like, we are in Cape Town, we can just go to a coffee shop and say hello to a person, and then we've networked, and you don't know if that guy has a business that you can do whatever social media for, or whatever the case may be. But I would be all for a fund like that to create a culture of entrepreneurship in this country, because the government can't be an employer of all South Africans. I mean, the state wage bill is it's very high. I think it's again, I stand to be corrected. I think it's like almost 60%. But we have an obligation now to look after those people. We've made an agreement. We have to honor the service of the people who work in government for government. But we can't. We have to find money and other revenue streams into the fiscus without adopting. Where can we cut? The austerity is about, we need to cut this, cut that, cut the fat, fire this, fire that, rather than what can we grow to bring into the fiscus. Yes. There are major problems with government inefficiencies and government employees and whatever. But the government employees is the lubrication that keeps society running. It keeps the revenues coming in with SARS and whatever. You can argue that there's a diminished return on investment when it comes to some departments are better than others, because some DGs are better than others. Some people are just better at their jobs than other people. It's just a function of humanity. But
can I just, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. But where's the logic where if you take someone that's a public servant and you compare somebody in the private sector, that a public servant is earning more than a public sector person, a private person.
It's a case by case basis.
But in the main, that is the case. And in terms of, if you work for somebody, okay, and you don't perform, there are consequences of non-performance.
And government employees can be fired. They get fired all the time.
But do they?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
But look at the incompetence in generally of public servants. So they're demanding these crazy increases year on year, which outstrips the private sector. But in terms of performance, it's really radically less than a private sector employee. So again.
Again, I have to caution about generalization because I can point to like cases in the private sector, but I don't want to build like an argument on my side to defeat your argument.
No, but do you agree? I mean, I am generalizing, but it's fair to say that a public servant's motivation to work hard is a little bit less than someone in the private sector.
Well, it depends because if the incentive is in the private sector, if you don't perform, you can get fired. If you are proposing that we take that threat of precarity into the public sector, I don't think that's the right way to go about that. People don't respond to threats; they respond to incentives.
Okay, but then how
so
do you fix that?
I would incentivize the private sector. I think that there are a lot of the people who are currently in the private sector. It's very reasonable for them in the public sector.
Okay, yeah.
Very reasonable for them to ask for the salary increases because of the macroeconomics of South Africa at this particular time. We have inflation, cost of living increases all the time. So what they're asking for in terms of, let's say the healthcare workers strike, not unreasonable. They weren't asking for anything unreasonable. And they were perfectly justified to then embark on industrial action. I remember at the time the media called it the death strike. Completely separate from the fact that nobody died on this death strike. And for the last 2 years, they've been engaged in a process of bargaining and meeting with the departments. So there are government inefficiencies. I mean, I remember for a time, Home Affairs was really bad, and then it was really good, and now it's really bad again. So if we incentivize our government employees and we find other streams of income to boost the fiscus of South Africa, rather than looking at cutting government spending, because if we keep cutting government spending, we increase the inefficiencies, and we don't look at other revenue streams. It just means that we're cutting this thing into smaller and smaller and less efficient quadrant of what it is. But I understand what you're saying. Like, I get frustrated with government services, but I also get frustrated with open serve and Telkom.
No, sure.
It's just a function of creating better services in corporate and private sector.
I just think, I suppose my point of reference would be the Department of Home Affairs. I
think that's everybody's.
So my son took to get because I'm divorced. We needed an unabridged marriage certificate. It took 2 years. 2 years
for something that actually
2 years for a document. And you go across, and I'm generally very amicable. I don't fight or anything of that nature. And I would ask the person, why does it take? I don't understand. Why does it take 2 years and there's no explanation?
I actually came back from this morning from Home Affairs.
What is it like?
We made an appointment, and then we got there, and then they said no, but you must, because we want a passport for my son.
Yeah.
So they said no, because my wife thought she's just gonna make one appointment.
Yes.
She said no, you have to make 2 appointments, but nothing on the internet says that you must make separate appointments. Anyway, so my wife was gonna go, and then she sat there for about half an hour. I said, helped a few. Sorry, we're offline. We can't.
Yeah. No, the offline thing.
Yeah.
So we told her no, but we took off from work. No, it's nothing.
Yeah.
I think next time I'll
And there's no empathy, right?
I told my wife next time I'm gonna just take our own internet, take a dongle with it, and just plug it in. It's fine. Internet. Something like that. But you're right. You're 100%
Yeah.
right.
No, it's also. I mean, it's arrogance as well.
No, totally.
You know, so you look at this person and you're nice, and what you get back mostly. Well, you know, a person's actions doesn't define the way I act. Okay, so if the person's rude to me, I'm not going to be rude back. I'm going to carry on just be nice. Okay,
But Home Affairs tests you.
no, but I mean,
Tests
inside of me, I think, you know, you bloody arsehole, you know, I know that you're getting paid more than the private sector, and it's coming from the exchequer, all right, and you'll go on strike as soon as that you're not getting the money that you want. You're not prepared to give me an answer. I'll wait 2 years for something. You don't say like, okay, sorry, sir, whatever. You just stare at me like I'm some bloody idiot that I'm asking an unreasonable request, and that and all I'm saying is, why does it take 2 years for me to get a document? That's all I'm asking. Okay, and you get that backlash. So that when I leave with a negative opinion about public
totally.
service, and that's generally. Yes, there are pockets. I must say, I'm going to congratulate the Otteries traffic department. I mean, you walk in there, those people are completely efficient.
Yeah.
Completely efficient. Go there, you get your driver's license sorted out, no attitude. If you ask something, you get a proper answer, etc., etc. Okay, so there are pockets.
Yes.
And you do find, and I must give them a shout out. Ottery Traffic Department was actually exceptionally good. Okay, but you have this kind of, and in fact, we'll be hard pressed to find somebody to compliment the Department of Home Affairs.
Nobody. Nobody likes Department of Home Affairs.
So then there's no empathy for people that pay taxes when you have this kind of attitude. And then when you read in the Sunday Times that they're going to go on strike because they want a 10% increase in salary, you think there's no empathy. Okay,
I would say that workers deserve to be remunerated in line with the rising cost of living, but I would separate that issue from the level of service. I would rather say we need to incentivize efficiency.
Yes.
Rather than
yes, exactly. You should incentivize efficiency, but and just think of this, Roscoe. So the Department of Home Affairs is the department that's in the coalface with the majority of the population, right? Mm-hmm. Why not implement a policy, top down, that the people are just nice?
I mean,
they're just nice. Because it doesn't take a lot just to be nice. Just be nice and be, if somebody's waited a long time and for instance, Nantel that took off work, and now there's this discrepancy, just say, I'm sorry, or show some empathy, not just be rude and just abrupt, etc. I tell you, if they just provided a policy across the whole Department of Home Affairs and say, you know what, be nice to your customers, because we're customers, right?
Yeah.
We are customers. Just be nice.
I mean, that
will go such a long way.
It's service delivery. It should be the minimum expectation that you are a public-facing public servant.
Yes.
And you need to, But again, Home Affairs and is probably the worst experience that South Africans can have in terms of government bureaucracy and inefficiency. And that's, I think that's a universal thing.
It is universal. Public servants across the world have a tendency of being arrogant. But we've got such huge problems in our country, okay? And I mean, we now spend over an hour and a half trying to resolve these issues. So I think we should wrap up. But there are things that are so simple, Roscoe. Just if people are more compassionate and show some empathy, it will just go a long way in just changing the discourse of our country. Yes, we've got problems. I believe that our problems are solvable. I believe, you and I, we come from different ideologies, and we become good friends. And the reason for that is because we've got at heart in changing the discourse of our country. That is the situation. So that is where both your motivation, my motivation is. And as we discussed now, we covered a whole lot of topics, but we find more common ground with the different ideologies than not. But the problem is that people have got a perception and they make assumptions about certain ideologies without engaging like the way you and I do and find a common ground. And when we find common ground, that's how we resolve the situation in our country.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's important to see the humanity in our fellow South African. Because the moment we stop seeing our fellow South African as a South African, it's a slippery slope towards a kind of a nationalism that, to be honest, it's looming. We need to avoid that political crisis that may be around the corner, because it will exacerbate the social and the economic crisis if we don't fix the divisions within our body politic. And it starts on a one-to-one basis.
Absolutely, it starts one-on-one. Roscoe, it's been a real pleasure. I'm so glad we've combined our podcasts and did this together. And it's been a real privilege. And I really thank you for doing this.
I'm thinking 2 minutes. 1 minute aside, right? I want to ask you a question. Another question. Can you, since I have you guys both I never have you guys both on a podcast. Can you give me just a minute and a half? Excuse me, a minute and a half. Seeing that both of you are on the co-op of Cape Conscious Media, can you just give us where you see Cape Conscious Media in 5 years?
You want to go first?
5 years.
In 5 years.
I'll tell you that there's this thing that called the mainstream media. I think that independent media is actually the mainstream, because that's where most people get their media from. They go to YouTube, they go to TikTok, they go to wherever they find it. So we kind of have an obligation to be responsible, even more so than the mainstream media has. Like what we platform, what we discuss, how we talk about these things. It's really important. For us, I see this Cape Conscious Media as playing a role in the next elections. As we want to be at the election center, we want to present politics not in the old way, but in people are smart, man, much smarter than like ENCA or Prime Media or SABC give them credit for. They pre-chew this analysis and they give only the simplest story. And I think what's been very good for us is to have deep, nuanced conversations about topics that are usually very divisive, but as soon as you dig down, you drill down into the underlying factors, it broadens the understanding, and it shows a model for speaking across the divides that may be there. So for us, I think, if not us, then other people will. Yes. So why not us?
Yes. Yeah, look, I concur with what you're saying, and I just find it's a real privilege to be part of Cape Conscious Media and be part of a platform where you can express opinions freely, with respect, and we bring all kinds of political parties to the podium, and we have these discussions. We talk about politics, we talk about sport, and it's uncensored, right? It's a situation where we can talk freely about how we feel. And I think in 5 years' time, where will we be in 5 years' time? I think we'll be a powerful media house. With that in mind, the content, and we will be powerful because of the content that we're creating and the diversified content. And for me, if anybody gets benefit for what we're doing or what we're trying to achieve or achieving, then to me that's mission accomplished. Okay? So if someone listens to any of our podcasts and they feel good, or they get information, or it lifts them up in somehow, some format, then to me, I think that we've achieved that we've achieved something. And I reckon that in the space between 9 and 5 years, that we will be known as an independent media that talks the truth and is relevant and informative.
No, thanks for that.
All right, so on that note, Roscoe, once again, thanks you so much.
Thanks,
and
Dave.
we'll see you next week again. Thank you so much for being part of the show. Thank you. Bye-bye.